Okay, so welcome to the first webinar. I want to start by saying that our intention was that we would do this on a weekly basis. We are getting a lot of community support, and if that continues, we will continue to do it weekly. However, it could very well become a fortnightly thing. Now, they are going to be also done in an ad hoc manner, so very informal. We're not trying to sell you anything. They've purely been created to help the community. We get a lot of requests for more tutorials for help that we can give you, and this is just one extra way that we can do that. So we're also going to be listening to you, especially the people that attend, as well as those who can't. But if you request something that you really want to know inside of PlusSpec, that's how we're going to choose it. So community and community response is going to dictate what we cover in these webinars. So at the end of this session, if you do have a question or if there's a topic that you want us to focus on, please let us know, and that way we can see what the response is and determine what we will cover. There's been an overwhelming response from the very beginning to show more and more 2D documentation. And I want to preface this by saying, first and foremost, with PlusSpec, you do need SketchUp Pro. SketchUp Pro gives you access to layout. And in this demonstration, I'm going to give you kind of an in-depth overview. In the past, we've only done very brief and I guess shallow overviews of what can be achieved in layout. And layout kind of gets a bad rap. When it was first released by SketchUp, it was, if I'm going to be completely honest, missing some of those professional kind of aspects or tools. But with every iteration or release, it's gotten stronger and stronger. And with the SketchUp 2017 release, Layout Pro has become just a professional, amazing tool. One of the biggest disconnects is that you can't control your line weight or your styles and the way that your drawing looks to achieve the drawings that you've been traditionally outputting. This is actually completely wrong. There's just a few things that you need to know, and that's what we'll cover today. Those little tips and tricks about how you can turn your PlusSpec model, that's obviously done in SketchUp, into a really professional and sexy looking set of drawings. And probably one of the big parts, or one of the key strengths of layout, is that it doesn't really dictate a style to you. You can really do whatever you want. If you're an architect, a designer, or a builder, and you have a bespoke or a very unique style, you can do it. Anything that you want to capture, you can do in layout. Now, if you can see my screen, you'll note that I've got a drawing on here, and if I zoom in, you'll see that there's a lot going on in the drawing. There is obviously the text, there's the site information, the contours, and other information that's required, your boundary line, etc. And it's also capturing a lot of different line types. We'll go into this, but I want to give you a very quick overview before we go too in-depth. One of the things that catches a lot of people out when they first go into layout is that it's a little bit different to any other traditional drafting software, and it's been done on purpose. It's an innovative kind of technology and a response to the design and construction industry by SketchUp. They didn't want to just create another drafting software. They wanted to do something that's going to actually benefit you in multiple ways, right? So one of the first things that is a bit of a disconnect for people when they go into layout is they're used to the standard traditional tools, and that's it. But you have to think of layout as kind of a combination of many things. It is a drafting software, obviously, but it's also a little bit of a Photoshop / InDesign and a PowerPoint orientated tool. So it is a tool that's really relying on communication, and it's saying, yes, you're going to be able to output your 2D drawing, and you're going to be able to do it in a parametric, intelligent way from your model that you've created in SketchUp. So when you make a change to your PlusSpec model in SketchUp, it will automatically update your drawings. That's intelligent, and that's going to expedite your 2D aspect of your projects, right? But it's also a communication tool because it's saying if you're going to do this, then you may as well spend the time, for example, when you meet with your client, to be able to go into PowerPoint mode and to make notes and changes as you present to them in your 2D drawing set. So that's probably the big thing. And I have to admit, it is something that jars you, but all new innovative technology jars you when you first go into it. You've just got to learn those basic set of rules that prevents you from really starting to output in the manner that you're used to. So in this set, you can see there's always going to be a drawing style. I'm not saying anything that I show you today, I'm not saying that it's they're amazing or that this is the quality, this is the best kind of quality you can do. This is very simple sets. These are essentially straight out of the box that's been used from your PlusSpec model and then brought into SketchUp layout with very, very minimal work. Just to also quickly talk about something in at Ruby Sketch PlusSpec, we definitely recommend and emphasize more 3D and less 2D. Obviously 2D is a requirement and therefore it is very important, but what we're trying to say is that the design and the actual benefits come from the 3D, and if you can spend more time in the 3D and less time in the 2D, you're going to become more efficient. I'm going to give you a quick run through of a few different things that we've done here, but before I do, I'm going to just quickly introduce you to the layout default tray. The layout default tray is very similar to the SketchUp workflow or the environment, and in the sense that you have your tray, and in it, it contains different things that you're going to use to control your model or your drawings. There are three in here that I'm going to focus on today, and they're the most important. And that is your layers. If I come down, your layers are key. If anyone has used Photoshop before, you'll know that the way that you control your Photoshop layers is that whatever layer is at the top will be overlaid on top of any layer that's below it. So once you understand that, you can understand how you can layer your drawings in a very efficient and smart way. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them. As I said earlier, we will be doing a 10-minute Q&A at the end, but I won't be answering them as we go through today until the 10-minute end. Now, again, I'm going to show you some drawings now. I'll go through them. So layers I'll talk about a little bit more, but we'll give you an understanding of the different kind of standard layers that we use and recommend at PlusSpec. I haven't got a title block in here, but it's very easy for you to create your own title blocks, and layout actually does come with some default title blocks that you can use also and manipulate. But it doesn't come with any actual default layers, so you are going to have to set this up once you understand the kind of layers and the layering system that you want to use. And you can see if I scroll down the different layering systems that I use. So I'll just open it. Wrong one. Let's go to, I'll just close a couple of these things so you can see it a bit better. All right. So in my layers, I have from top to bottom different things that I've called out, and these respond to the different elements that I'm going to use in my design. I've obviously got dimension, I've got call outs, which is my symbols and so forth. Text, entourage is typically people or trees, etc. Line work, because you are going to be doing masks and line work over the top of your smart reference to your PlusSpec model. And then you have your 3D overlay, 3D master, masks, hatches, and so forth. These give you the ability to essentially bring in your base model and then starting to fatten them up and to represent them how you want them to look. I will go into that in more detail, but it's very important that you get into the habit of drawing on the correct layer. The way that you do that is you click on the layer that you want to start drawing on, and if I'm in my dim layer, for example, I can now know that I can go into my dimensions and I can dimension, and it will be immediately assigned to the correct layer. That being said, if you do make a mistake at any time, you can right-click on an object and you can move it to a layer and select from the list. So it's very easy to change. The layers also give you a really good ability to be able to control the visibility. of your drawing and the way that you're going to be able to access your model too. And you can do that by, for example, hiding layers by clicking on the eye. If you click on the eye, it will hide every single thing that was on that layer. So callouts are gone there, text gone, and so forth. And there's many different ways you're going to use that, especially if one layer is on top of another layer and you don't really want to be, or if the object is kind of getting in the way of what you're wanting to do, you simply hide it. Secondly, you can also lock layers so you're not accidentally moving them. So once you've brought in, for example, your PlusSpec for SketchUp model and you've set it in place, but you don't want it to be accidentally moved or modified, then you can simply click on the lock layer. So these are directly input from my PlusSpec for SketchUp model, and I've got several in this particular file. And before I go any further, I'll quickly just jump into another quick example. These ones are examples in metric, but I will give you a customer spotlight, and that will be in imperial. So as you can see, here's just a basic template with a basic title block, etc. It's just done indicatively without spending much time. This, if I zoom in, is a direct reference to the PlusSpec model. In fact, the other thing that people get confused with layout is that layout is a completely separate program to SketchUp. It's not. Yes, most other drafting software, they have it combined, but what SketchUp is trying to do is say, spend the time in the right spot and don't get confused by another part of the methodology or part of the process. So if you're concentrating on the design, then concentrate on the design in 3D. Make your changes there. Then, when you want to concentrate onto your 2D or make changes to your 2D, go into the 2D. You're going to have your layout file and your SketchUp file open simultaneously. And again, as soon as you make a change to your SketchUp model, as long as you press Save on your SketchUp model, and then right-click and on the SketchUp reference or inference, and then select Update Model Reference, it will update. Now, you can actually also, in your layout file, if you don't have your SketchUp with you or open, for example, you might be communicating with your client, at any time you can right-click on it and you can actually open it with SketchUp too. So it's a very powerful tool. Now, as you can see, what we're trying to say is in PlusSpec is spend the time where you need to. If you're an architectural designer, that's in the design part of it. If you're a builder, it's understanding the complexities, putting in the structure, understanding any issues and so forth. And if you're an estimator, you're just worried about trying to find the quantities and the bill of materials, etc. But then in the 2D, you can come in there and you can just simply fatten it out. Now, as you can see, the layering system is here also, and that means, again, I can control it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly cut that. I've now taken out my reference, my PlusSpec model, right? And you can see what's left. These are the annotation. These are what make your drawings essentially look really good. And you need them, you require them. There's certain things that you want to put in. This was done in an old version where there was no smart hatching in PlusSpec, and we will talk about that because now you can actually click on any SketchUp section and you can assign smart parametric hatching to it. So hatching, colors, textures, etc. This really expedites the layout process and makes it a lot more intelligent and fast. In this particular example, the user actually had to trace around all the walls to assign it, for example, a brick hatch. You no longer need to do that, and it was one of the biggest drawbacks with layout previously. But as you can see, what are 2D documentations? They're purely just trying to communicate your design in a 2D format so that it can be built. And the most important thing is that you're putting in your notes and your dimensions. Now, there's another thing that's very important in layout, and that is your styles. So when you import a drawing, you're going into your SketchUp model, and you're assigning it a scene. Those scenes have been created in PlusSpec, so we expedite the process of going from your PlusSpec for SketchUp model into layout by automatically generating your smart templates, your ground floor plans, your elevations, your sections, etc. That means when you do load or import your PlusSpec for SketchUp model, when you first bring it in, you're wanting to tell it what scene it is on. So that's how you're going to set it up. So on this particular plan, you want it to be ground floor. Your second page, you're going to set up your first floor and so forth. And you're just going to go down the list. Right. So if I quickly just give you a quick run through the different pages in here too, we'll just actually have a look at that. You can see that on the first floor plan. These are all done in 2D black and white. And how has that been controlled? It's actually been controlled inside of SketchUp through your PlusSpec scenes. Your styles, if you click on the SketchUp model and then go into your style, actually tells you what you are using. And in this particular one, we're using the PlusSpec default floor plan. This was set to black and white. But if you understand that the styles are what is going to essentially give you the ability to control the way that your drawings look, whether you're going to show it traditional 2D black and white, whether you're going to show it with color and texture, or any of the other plethora of styles that are available, that's when you have the ability to really control the look and style of your drawing. So for example, if I go back into this set, and I'll show you an example plan. This is a traditional 2D black and white drawing. It's displaying, I think it doesn't really matter what the construction type is. It's obviously 2 double skin masonry. And it's shown with a smart hatch in PlusSpec, and I'll show you how to do that. It's also got showing demolition, and it's in the traditional 2D black and white format. You can't see what's going on below it. However, as you know, in PlusSpec, we give you the ability, and you work essentially predominantly in color and texture because there's no better way to design. And one of the things that people don't really understand when they bring it in is that the way that you set up your model is how it's going to look essentially in layout. So before you bring it in layout, you want to ensure that each one of your styles and scenes have been set up appropriately. They look how you want it to look. So for example, if I open this particular SketchUp reference, I'm going to open with SketchUp. You can see that in here I want it to be color and texture, but I've also lightened the texture. And this is where you start to get really interesting control. So first and foremost, I've got my demo, I've got my ground floor, I've got my ground floor furniture, and in this particular scene that I've created, I've actually gone into my layers and I've turned on my furniture, etc. And I've ensured that I've got it to the texture, color and texture style. Not the 2D black and white, which is what I have for this particular one. This one is actually set at shaded, actually. But the way that I'm controlling this, if I turn off my fog, you'll see that my concrete will read very, very heavy. So I'm just trying to quickly show you how you can actually manipulate your drawings, even showing color and texture, but by using such things as fog and making it look the way you want it to look inside of PlusSpec for SketchUp before you bring it into layout, you're going to be able to very easily control the different aspects and different ways that you want to show your drawing. So if I turn my fog back on, all I've done is set my fog to lighten the background. It's a great technique for anyone that wants to use color and texture, but are sick of having when they're actually importing their drawings, having it read so dark. So if I actually update this scene by turning off the fog, and I update it, and now I save it, I'm now going to go back into my layout, and I'm going to update the model reference. And it's automatically done it, actually, in this instance, because I've set it to auto. And hopefully you can see the difference in the way that looks. Now, it looks fine, but as you can see, one of the things that when people first bring it in, they're like, how do I control it? And you can control it, and you're going to control it in many different ways. You're going to control it inside of PlusSpec for SketchUp, and using the SketchUp tools and the scene tools and style tools to make sure that essentially you get it looking the way you want it to look. So let's quickly go back into SketchUp and talk about styles. In my style, I'm actually in my color and texture style, right, at the moment. Or this floor plan too. At any time, you can click on the styles and you can go into edit. If you go into edit, you can now even start to manipulate the overall line weight of your section cuts. So in here, if I zoom in, you can see that there is an emphasis on the section cut. It's not super strong though. I can come into this part and say, well, I want my section cut to read a little bit thicker. If I click on the 3, you can see that it is now getting thicker. So automatically you can control the way it's reading inside of SketchUp, so that when you're going into layout, you've got less of a manipulation required. And it depends on the kind of scale that you're using, and you play around with this and you'll see what you can do and how it looks at the different scales, depending on the system that you're using. Also, you can control even the section cut color. If you want to change the section cut, you can do it. And there's a few other different ways you can control and manipulate your model here too. So whether or not you want to show your edges, profiles, how you want it to read. Play around with your styles and see what that actually does. Make sure that whenever you make a change that you go into the scene that you're wanting to update and then right click it and then select update. Otherwise it won't save those changes. I'm actually going to turn the fog back on here and then update it. Okay, so it's good habit to try and spend the time inside of SketchUp to try and ensure that it's essentially reading in the way that you want it to read in layout. Because you don't, there's no point getting essentially having a scene, so a plan or an elevation, bringing it into layout and thinking that you're going to completely manipulate it and change it there. No, spend the time to make sure that aesthetically it's reading the way that you want it to read in the first place, and it will save you a hell of a lot of time. So again, I'm just going to save that, and I'm now going, well, it's automatically going to update. So as you can see, it's a very smart connection. Any change you make, if I was to split the walls and manipulate them, it would automatically update that. Right? If I go back into my model, and for example, I'm just going to come off to the side, and I'm actually going to now turn on my section plane. I want to show you how we do these solid sections. What you've done is it's just a standard SketchUp section cut, or from the PlusSpec generated ones. What you want to do is you want to just activate your section cut so you can see it. So display your section plane. Once you've done that, simply right click on it and go into now the plus section hatching. This is kind of in a beta phase. It's going to be improved and expanded upon, but it's very, very user-friendly and easy to use. And as you can see, you can control the materiality or the symbols that you want to use for every single material or product that makes up your walls, slabs, or your project. In this particular instance, I've turned everything to grey. However, for example, if you wanted to, you could go into your brickwork knowing that these are both masonry, and I could choose, for example, a masonry one. You can also create your own. We'll probably go into that into further detail later on, but if I do a quick update, press masonry and press submit, wait for that to load, you'll see that that will update. I won't save that though, and I want to skip ahead quickly. So let me just open my pages. There's a few other things that I want to quickly talk about. So styles, and understanding the style is really important. However, you can, if you go back into the plan actually, you can further manipulate your line weight. And again, this is one of the big things that people don't really understand. They do think that once you have brought in the model that you can't really manipulate the overall line weights here either, but you can. When you click on the model reference, you're able to go into again, the SketchUp model, go into the styles, and in the styles you're able to see this line weight, and this represents overall line weight. So at this particular scale, I could decide that the line weight is not reading as heavy as I want it to, so I can actually add to it. So I might go to a 0.7, for example. And once that updates, you're going to see that it's going to go a lot thicker. I actually did 5.7 there. Let's do an actual 7. There we go. And if I go lighter, still a 0.2, you can see that it's going to lighten your overall drawing. So you've got an overall control of your sections and your overall line weight thicknesses in your model. And play around with it, you'll kind of have an understanding of what works best at what scale that you use. Depending, yeah. depending on a few different factors. And you'll want to do a few test prints just to see how it actually prints too. So you can easily control the overall line weight in here. And obviously you can use the layout tools to draw shapes, to draw lines over the top. So there's a really big facet or part of the layout process is what we call overlays. And that is, for example, if I go back, if I hide my SketchUp model and I go into my layers, I'm going to turn on my 3D overlay. And as you can see, I've got my overlay here because we show demolition lines inside of PlusSpec as red, as default in the section hatching. And some people don't like that. They rather do it in the traditional manner. So what I've actually done is I've brought in two models. I've got my master model reference, which is my ground floor plan, and then I've simply overlaid it with my 3D overlay. So I'm going to hide my actual other model, and you can see here, if I grab that model here, all I've done is I've hidden through the extents of what it's showing what is actually available in this drawing to be seen. This gives me the ability to do a lot of different things, including the ability to be able to ensure that if something changes, I can still trace it. So if I turn back on my master but turn off my overlay, this isn't going to change really, your demolition stuff. But if it did, all I need to do is return my overlay back on and then move my lines accordingly to match the move. It's a very simple process. But when people see it, they're kind of thinking it's going to be a lot of extra work. Trust me, it's not. And we'll probably spend a little bit more time going into overlays and showing you exactly the workflow for it, because it is a little bit of an advanced strategy. All right, let's just quickly jump through this set. And I want to quickly show you a few of the other things that you can do in very intelligent ways inside of layout. Obviously, you can show things in the traditional manner, 2D orthogonal views, such as the elevations and plans and so forth. But the other really big benefit is that you're able to bring up your 3D. And essentially, why you're spending the time to do and work in 3D is because it's more communicative. Everyone understands it. So you can create some very interesting sets here and in your documentation where you do a combination of, for example, a traditional line work drawing combined with a perspective. And this really makes the understanding and communication just a lot smoother between the architect or designer and the builder and consultants and even the clients. The other thing that's important to know is that layout, there is other software that kind of automate as much of the process as possible. So when they do a section cut and then you place it on a page, the callouts will automatically update. Layout doesn't do that, and it doesn't do it for a reason. And one of the key reasons is that often if a software is trying to be all-encompassing and trying to show too much, it means that people rely on it a little bit too much too, and it can really cause error. The ability or the having to create your own callouts and know what page you put them on, etc., is traditional. You do it in AutoCAD if you're using that anyway, but it also means that you have your due diligence and you're aware of it right from the beginning, that you've got to be aware of changes to your drawing. I've seen cases in other software where they're so-called all intelligent, but look, they're still following a set of rules, and if you don't follow the set of rules properly, you can be convinced that it's working the right way, not bother about actually checking it, and it can lead to error and oversight. But actually, everything inside of your PlusSpec for SketchUp model has got intelligent data. So that's BIM, right? Building information, modeling information. So as you can see, I've done some callouts here. And these callouts, I can either overwrite and put in my own text, or I can actually call out what I want to actually pick up. So if I click on this little down arrow, what I've done is I've drawn my annotation, but it gives me the ability to pick out what I actually want to call. When you drop a window or a door into PlusSpec, it does label it. It labels it in various ways. So it's going to call out the window type. It's going to, if you've used a brand, it's going to tell you the brand. If you have used a paint on there, it's going to tell you it, as well as the sizing, for example. But it also gives you the ability to say what window it is. So it's window number 1, for example. It is important to note that we like, obviously, in 2D documentation to have the windows and doors going in an order, typically clockwise. If you drew this window first, this is the window that I'd actually drew first inside of PlusSpec. But then if I drew another window over here and then deleted it and then drew this window will be called window number 3. So you can edit these things also. So I want to quickly show you that. I'm going to open it in SketchUp, and I'm going to show you how information is captured so that you can actually smart annotate in layout, and that's a really key feature. It saves you so much time. Here's the model. Let's go into perspective mode. If you keep on double clicking into a group, every group, as long as you've got the entity info, will tell you what it is. If I keep on clicking, it's going to start to see what it is through definitions and instances. So this is called sliding window number 1. If I keep double clicking, window number 4. That's overall window number 4. It even then breaks it down into panels and so forth. If you want to overwrite these things, you can simply click into the group, and now I can manipulate it. So perhaps I want to call something else out here. I can go, I'm just going to put question marks, and I'm going to save it. When I go back into the reference, you'll see that I will be able to, if it works properly, I should be able to pick out the question marks, but I need to update my model first, and I'm not going to bother. Okay, but that's how you can very quickly call out your actual windows, right? I also quickly want to show you how you can create your drawings, your window schedule and your door schedules in the traditional manner, essentially using your lines and setting the different kind of ways that you want to represent it. And then you're simply bringing in your SketchUp reference. And the way that this is done is you're just copying your model once you've brought it in, then you paste it. I've got quite a few things going on at once, so bear with me. I had way too much open there. Let's just reopen that. Apologies about that. I have about 20 things open, which is my golden rule not to do. But there's always got to be something that happens in a presentation, right? All right, so you've just copied. If I actually change the style here, or if I bring it out, I'm going to show you that this is actually just showing the scene. So if I go into the scene, I've gone into left. I've gone into a standard view left. And if I go into the style, I've put it to hidden line. However, if I wanted to, I could go in and I could say that I want it to be a different style. So for example, construction. And that's giving me the exact orthogonal view, so I can get the scale, etc. I've set the scale in there, and the way that you set your scale, by the way, is in your SketchUp Model tab. You can go down, as long as it's in the ortho mode, you can go through and select the different scales that you want to use. And then all I've done for me, for this traditional manner, is I actually wanted it to be black and white, and I only need to know the part that's around the window. If there's multiple windows, you can just copy them, put a break in there, and then realign them by determining where your viewport is showing, so what extent it is showing. There is also something else that's incredible, because a lot of architects and designers do like to show the visual representation of window and door schedules. However, a lot of people also prefer to keep it just purely to tables. And this is where PlusSpec really shines, because we are obviously doing a comprehensive bill of quantities or bill of materials for you. So every time you draw a window and you click the takeoff tool produces the schedule. So again, if I go back into here and I click on the takeoff, it's generated my takeoff. If I click onto my Windows tab, it's brought in all of the information about those windows or doors. That means if I output this to Excel, which I've already done, I can then manipulate my Excel document even further. I can start to capture exacts, numbers, putting any other information in there, whatever I want to do. Then you're saving it as a CSV file. If you haven't done that in Excel, it's super easy. You just, in your Excel document, file, save as CSV. Now, when you're in layout, you can now draw, it's a great tool. You can draw your table. You can set it, you can manipulate it in many different ways, but more importantly, you can then double click into it and you can right click onto one of the cells and you can actually insert table data. And that means you're going to reference your Excel or CSV file. Now, the great thing about this is it's a live document. So if I was to open this CSV file and make a change, it's automatically going to update. This means that if you, for example, delete a window or you change a window, it's a very easy process for you using PlusSpec. Either you generate a new takeoff and then you save it back into your CSV file and then relink, and therefore it's already linked. It will update immediately. Or you just make the change manually to the CSV file directly, and then this will update automatically. So let me just show you what that looks like. Because at any time you can click into the table and you can actually open with Table Editor, which is going to open your CSV version of your Excel document. And it's just opened it on my second screen. Let me just drag that over. Here we are. So this is all it is. I can define this, I can further manipulate it. If I wanted to separate my the brand and put it into a different field, I can easily do it. It's going to take me a very short amount of time to do it too. And knowing that it's a live document that's linked means that if you do make changes, they're very easy to capture. You're not having to always go back and manipulate and change separately. So that's all that is. I put in the table and then inserted that data. It automatically resizes and makes that change. Okay, so hopefully that's showing you that you can also smart annotate, and smart annotation is very important for the profession. It means a lot of mistake and error happens when you're trying to manually, for example, copying and pasting your notes and forgetting to actually update it, or including spelling errors or accidentally calling out something that's incorrect. Let's go into, we've gone into the site layout example showing existing with different line weights. And this is just a combination. It's a combination of my contour plan inside of SketchUp as my SketchUp model, and it's a combination of the CAD drawing. So I got a DWG here, and all I did is I brought my DWG into SketchUp, and then I exploded it. I saved it. I brought it into layout, and I exploded my CAD line weight. When you bring anything in, for example here, if I do it over here, I'm going to copy, paste it, and I'm going to move it out. That's my contours. So this is an overlay technique. But if I wanted to, for example, manipulate the way my contours look, contours are a good one because they never really change, unless you're doing cut and fill, but you're going to show that typically separately. So at any time, I can click on my reference. Now, you just want to, before you explode, you want to make sure that it is set to like a black and white. So I typically, just to make sure that everything's going to work fine, I'll go into my default styles, I'll make it a hidden line, and then I like to turn it to vector. And this is what we're going to talk about now, because it's one of the most important things about separate to the way that you set out your layers and your styles. There are three different kinds of line types or image types in layout, and in fact in every software, and that is vector, raster, and hybrid. One of the things that people ask me is, but when I insert my PlusSpec for SketchUp model, it doesn't look good. It doesn't read well. And that's going to be for two reasons. First, you haven't probably set it up and made it looking how you want to inside of your PlusSpec for SketchUp model. And secondly, you're probably not gone through and assigned the line weight, which I've shown you how you do. You go into the SketchUp model, change the line weight. But maybe you brought it in as raster. And if you bring it in raster, you need to know that raster is not really focusing on lines. So if I zoom into my door, you can see that the door's not really, the line work's not reading super well. Raster is about emphasizing color and texture. It's great for perspectives. It's great for anything that you're trying to show in a 3D format, for example. But it's not great for lines. So if you want to create very nice looking lines, but show color and texture too, you're going to be using hybrid. And hybrid is the best one to use with your PlusSpec model. It's the one that I recommend. And that gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you the color and texture as well as the line and the line quality. However, if you're doing traditional 2D black and white, you might actually want to set it to vector. And vector is all about lines. It doesn't care, and it can't actually handle texture. It can handle color, so it will simplify color, but it won't handle texture. So if I grab this and go to vector, it just warns you what it's going to do. You can see that my line work will be a lot better. It will print a lot better too, but it can't handle the texture, obviously. So understanding when you want to use raster, vector, and hybrid is also very important. One of the things that ties into that again also is when you go into your file document setup, you can go into your paper. And obviously when you're first loading layout, you can choose the paper size that you want to use. That's simple stuff, and it's not what I'm focusing on today. But one of the most important things is the rendering resolution. Now, your output resolution should always be set to high. You always want it to print at its highest possible quality. However, your display resolution will probably be set to medium by default. Now, the reason why it is set to medium is if you're creating a large document set of like 15, 20 plus pages, if you set your display resolution to high, which means the way it looks on the screen, it can slow down your layout file. But I do want to emphasize, if you haven't purchased PlusSpec SketchUp Pro 2017, it's well worth it, because layout has become, the graphics have become a lot better, the quality of the line work has become a lot better, the speed of layout has become a lot better. So if it's one of those things that frustrated you in the past, these changes alone are worth the upgrade. I've set the display resolution to high here, but if I zoom in and I change it to low, which maximizes the speed and efficiency of when I'm working in layout, you'll see that it will actually change the way dramatically it reads. Well, actually not too dramatically here. It's not too bad with the way I've set it up, but it will print a little bit differently. And also, depending on the way that you've set your drawing up, it might have a more significant effect there. Okay, so document setup is very, very important that you control it in that way. And I'm going to go back to high. I typically work on high for documentation sets that are less than 10 pages, and then if they're more than 10, I normally go to medium. That will definitely control the way your drawings are looking. And so that ties again back into whether or not you want to show it with hybrid or vector or whatever. So let's go through. I've given you a couple of examples now. For example, this is raster because it is showing color and texture. However, if I wanted to manipulate it again, I can go into the SketchUp reference. Each one is different. Each one is controlled differently. Like I'm manipulating the line weights of every different reference drawing, so I can control each one individually. And I'm also individually selecting what I want them to be read as, or how I want them to be read. So if I put the hybrid, you can see it's putting the line work in there. It's becoming a little bit better in the line work, but it's not what I want for that particular reference. All right, let's go down through a couple of other things here. Sections and markups. PlusSpec gives you the ability, obviously, as I said, to capture the different hatching, but it's very easy for you to go in and to essentially bring in any kind of profile or hatching that you want to use. So if we don't have it, or if it's not available, or if it doesn't work parametrically, simply go in and create a hatching layer and create the one that you want to use. This is a reference of the color and texture. I've brought it in there. If I go into this particular drawing, you'll see that I've set the line weight to this style and it's on a hybrid. Again, I can manipulate it if I want to. You do need to have, you can't use vector if you want to be able to show the PlusSpec smart hatching. It has to be on vector, and it has to be, on the hybrid or in raster. And it also has, it can't be hidden line. Hidden line actually hides the PlusSpec hatching. But you can do markups. Markups you can do by using the pencil tool and then click on the freehand, and then you can create the bubble and call it out how you want to. Every single symbol, every single thing that you can see here is manipulated through scrapbooks. I'm not going to spend really any time on scrapbooks today, but it's an incredible resource that gives you the ability to really go through and choose the symbols that you want to use and the style, and set up the style of the drawings and how you want them to be read and displayed. A lot of architecture and design practices do spend maybe, half a day setting up, or a day setting up their scrapbooks and really personalizing it, as well as their title blocks, etc. And then it's a simple drag and drop exercise. You can drag it in and then manipulate it as required. So, quick example. Again, the most important things here is that all of the work's been done for me inside of the section that I did inside of my PlusSpec for SketchUp model. However, I have put in a few little line work just to ensure that I'm capturing it and it's reading the way I want it to read. Setting the line weight by going into my line tool. In your stroke, you can set the stroke and you can set the line weights, you can set the line styles, and so forth. Now we are about to run out of time, so I'm going to quickly try and jump through a few extra little bits and pieces, and then we'll go into the Q&A if there is any. PlusSpec. One of the other questions people ask me is, with layout, can you actually capture traditional 2D black and white drawings? The answer is yes. This is directly from a PlusSpec model. Every single thing in here, the capping, the parapet capping, etc., has all come from my PlusSpec model. The only things that I've done in this particular model, if I turn off my SketchUp references by going into my layers and hiding my 3D master, that is what I've added on top. So there is this ability, like in every single CAD software, whether it's BIM or whatever, there are times where it's going to be more beneficial to carry or capture line weight or even certain things in your model rather than modeling it. However, we do emphasize on modeling. In this particular example, I hadn't set the way that I wanted the floor structure to be, etc. I just put in the structural information, and then everything else I'm just going through using my line tool and going into my line layer and adding it to it. And it doesn't take very long. This entire drawing is intelligent. If I was to change my model, it would update and I would just have to quickly manipulate it to suit, but it's very easy to manipulate. I'll turn on my master again, and I'm going to go down into details. Again, you can show your drawings in any manner, any way that you want them to read. I actually do like showing or juxtaposing the black. I like to keep my model as black. I was working with a very good design architect, and he always drew with black, blue, and red was always for markups, blue was always for annotation, and black was always for the drawing. It made a very clear drawing to read. But that's just a personal preference for me. But again, you can go through and you can capture those things in your 2D that you need to. And you can, more importantly, do combinations. So this is just my scene that I've set up. In fact, I can even double click in it, and I can, if I just let me, I'm going to release that clipping mask. Right, now that I've double clicked into my model, you can see that I can go through and I can actually reassign this at any time. It's a great tool, great way to be able to pick up details. Everyone understands 3D. Not many people can understand 2D straight away, even if you've got a lot of experience in the industry. And as you can see, all of your connections, your annotation, remember where they were actually connecting to. So it can be messy, but that's because you've moved the model and it's trying to say, well, I don't want you to have to completely redo it. Let's quickly keep on going through. Details pages. 3D details are key. We're really pushing 3D details. We think they are the future. And we also believe that SketchUp and PlusSpec and Layout are the only true software that you can do it in. And as you can see, these are just pulling out details, scenes from your model, set them up how you want to, and you can very easily show your details in 3D and pull them out. It's got grids to set up that page, so every page you can use grids to help you set them out and then just hide them, so they're not going to print and they're not going to be there. So that gives you complete control of the way that you want to represent and show that. If I quickly go back in to one other before I open up the Q&A, in fact I'll open up the Q&A, so if anyone has any questions please write them. If not, I'll keep on just going on this tangent and finish off on showing you a customer spotlight. Okay, so setting up grids is actually really easy. All you're actually doing is going in. I've got actually a grid layer that I've created because I do use grids a lot. And when I go into my grid layer, if I unhide them, click on your grid layer so you're activating that layer. And then I just like to separate the grids by choosing the line style. So for example, go into your pencil, start drawing. When you draw, it's going to remember your last setting. So to avoid that from happening, what you can do is you can click on the style that you've already set up and then click on copy style. If you haven't added that to your menu, go into your view toolbars and definitely add it. It's a great one. So you click on the style that you want to copy, click copy style, and then now if you go into the line tool, it's going to remember that exact style. So to set up the grids, all I did was space them. I just went, okay, right, I know that this is the extent of the drawing that I want. You can, depending on the paper size that you're using and so forth. Also, in layout, you can actually copy and move things and draft them purely just using layout to scale. The only difference is you can't draw 1:1. You actually have to know the scale that you want it to be in. So if you're drawing it 1:100, after you've moved it, you're then going to type in the distance that you actually want it to be to read at 1:1. You can also annotate 1:1 because you can actually go into your dimension and rather than saying, for example, auto scale, you can click it off and you can say, right, I want it to be 1:5. And that means if you drew it 1:5 scale, it's going to be 50, right? So that's how you can easily manipulate and draw even purely in the 2D SketchUp files. I'm going to give you a quick customer spotlight. This is Scott J. He was a Revit user. He now uses PlusSpec only, and he's doing some amazing drawings. He's a designer and builder, and this is using Imperial. And you can see that he's using the reference model. If it was to update, everything has changed. The drawing is reading perfectly. He set up the style that he wants it to read as. He's used some hatching to cut through the cabinets and so forth. And then you can set up your different kind of annotations and your legends. All of these things you can do, your notes, depending on how you want them to read. So if I zoom out, I'm just going to quickly go through them. Elevations, same thing. How do you set up elevations? You actually set them up with a masking layer. So the masking layer is actually very important because obviously in your PlusSpec and your SketchUp model, you're seeing through. You haven't set up an actual solid part that is actually going to read as your site. So it gives you the ability to hide the parts of the model that you don't want shown. Again, you can set up your grid lines if you're using them, and annotation. You can insert trees and other notes, but essentially 90% of this has come directly from the model. You spent the time in the model and you're just using it to call out. Same with these other elevations. I'll just quickly zip through sections. You can do sections in two different ways. You can do them in North America. Sections are often done with just a solid color because at a very depending on your scale, unless you're very zoomed in, I actually agree because you can't actually see a lot. For example, in metric, 1:100, which is pretty standard for sections. What's the point of spending the time? When you print it, you don't see anything. So I actually like this idea, and then the call outs are what is actually going to actually detail the project. So we'll keep on running through. Now Scott J is doing some amazing drawings and he will be doing a customer spotlight with us. So you'll see some of his work on our website shortly. And you can even see some of the traditional 2D drawings that he's pulling in too. If you've already got a vast library of 2D drawings that you've done with AutoCAD, all you need to do is bring them into SketchUp, save them as a file, and then you can just import them directly in here. If you want to manipulate the line work, you can explode them, and then you can access every single line and manipulate them. Save them, put them into your own scrapbook, and you can use them forever after. Even structural, so you can go into a lot of information with the details. Reframing, 3D in conjunction with 2D. That is the power of layout. And I don't believe any other software gives you the ability to do both the 2D and the 3D like this. All right. You can also do inserts, and that's the last thing I'm going to talk about. So Simpson Strong Tie, if you don't know, we've partnered with Simpson Strong Tie. There's going to be a lot more of their products inside of PlusSpec. But they do some great inserts that you can use. You can go to their website, you can go to anyone's website, and simply, if their drawings are adequate and they read well and they've been done well, you can simply insert them into your page, and they're just an image, but they're going to print well, they're going to read well, and they're going to be very communicative. All right, so I'm now going to quickly go through some questions and answers. One of the questions is, do we provide a layout template? We are in the process of doing them. We've done a very basic one for now. We will be releasing another very shortly, but again, we'll probably keep it a little bit open, so not going into too much detail, but show the example or sample layers and so forth that we use. Probably we'll release it just without a title block. All right, so another question is there a quick way to adjust dimensions and changing the length of them, of the extending line? So it's a funny one, because in Australia, we typically do keep very short dimension lines. So if I come into here and draw a dimension, you can see it's going to pick it up. Let me just do it like so. However, the leader you can't really control it. You can control it by choosing where you want your actual line to be, your central line, and that's going to give you the ability to control this inference. You can't set it up, and obviously if you move it out, it's going to pick up where you first started to draw from. To manipulate this, all you need to do is double click on the dimension line and then change the leader itself. Once you've done it, you can simply reference it. We will be releasing a template for Australian users that want to do it in this way, that will automatically do it for you, so that will be released shortly. However, in a lot of other countries, they actually like to have long leading lines, and the reason why is because it enables you to see exactly where it's relating to in your model. So that's why it is like that. So it's up to you and your style of how you do it. I have another question about how do you connect the window and door numbers from the 3D model to the window schedule. At the moment, yes, you need to, in the CSV file that I created, if I go into that, when I exported my takeoff with my window schedule, I simply went into my Excel document and added the different ones, but it's done in order. So it knows what is number 1, number 2, number 3, so you simply know that that's the top and that's the bottom. Unless you reorder them, and then obviously once you've updated your CSV, if anything changes, then it's a live link. So it's not really that much extra work. Okay, so the other question I've had is, how do you draw lines in layout to a specified length? So again, this goes back into the manual drafting that I said before. You're never drawing at 1:1 scale. You are actually drawing you have to kind of understand the scale that you want to draw it to. So for example, if I was to go into my line tool, and I'm just going to leave it, I'll change the line and I'll change the color. Okay, so if I draw a line, if you look down at the bottom, it's telling me the length, and depending on the units you're using, whether you're using metric or imperial, it will tell you how long you've drawn that wall. So for example, or that line I should say. Right? Now, for you, 61.9 millimeters is what it actually is on the page in reality. But if you're wanting to draw, for example, a 1:100 scale or a 1:50 scale, you just need to do the quick calculation in your head. So if you want to draw a meter long wall and it's at 1:100, then you know what you need to type in. Same with offsetting. So if you copy a line and move it, you can then just simply, before you do anything else, type in the amount that you wanted it to actually move by, and then it will do it to actual scale. It's obviously not as easy as the pure AutoCAD methodology where you're drawing 1:1 and then telling it what scale to draw at. That would be a great feature, but trust me, once you get used to it and you just do those calcs in your head, it's actually not too hard, especially in metric. Another question I have is there a way of setting up structural grid lines for plans, elevations, and sections? Simple answer is yes. So inside of your PlusSpec for SketchUp model, there is also a grid layer, and you can set grids. You can do it in two different ways. You can do it with line work, or you can even use the pure tape measure tool. So if I go into this model, for example, if I wanted to, I've got a layer here. I don't actually have my grid layer yet, so I can just create it, or I can let PlusSpec automate it for me if I create my scenes. When I go into my grid layer, you can actually use the tape tool, and you need to have the line of reference, obviously. But what you're able to do is say, okay, I know that is my grid line there from the exterior part of my wall. And then you can grab the line, and now you can come out into the axis or the direction, and you can simply place it. So if you know that it's, perhaps 3 meters for your first one, and then your next one's over here, and then your last one is over here. As you can see, you can set them up. Now, when you go into layout, you're just going to ensure that you can see this layer. So when you go into a ground floor plan, make sure that the grid layer is activated and it's not hidden. And then that way you'll know that you can actually use it, which means inside of layout, you can simply, at the end with the grid line, if we go into here, you're simply putting in the element that you want to use. I don't think it was in, there we go. So this is a grid line, and all you've done is gone into your scrapbooks, and you'll find that there are different drawing references and symbols that you can use, column grids, etc. So then you can just overlay them on top of. So it is actually quite easy to do. You just need to make sure that you add the numbers correctly inside of layout. Okay, so I have another question. If you change your section location, does the section marker location automatically update? No, not at this stage. That one is, again, your due diligence to make sure that if you do make a change that you've captured it. Yeah, it would be great if it was automated just to get rid of that possibility of error. But typically, if you have changed the section, your drawing is going to change, which means it's going to really enable, well, it's going to be a prompt for you to go back into your other drawing and change the location marker. Is auto dimensioning up and running? No, auto dimensioning, just so everyone knows, we're working on many different tools. We would love to have auto dimension. We plan to have auto dimension inside of PlusSpec, and that's going to be an interesting thing, but we're not even in our alpha stage of that yet. Dimensioning is not actually hard. Unfortunately, it's one of those things though in layout, people see the dimensioning and it's considered to be difficult, but it's as easy as what are you doing in AutoCAD. I do understand that there are some programs that allow you to auto dimension, and that obviously is a time saver. So it would be a great feature. That being said, look, I don't think it's a game changer. It doesn't take long to actually dimension, and it also ensures that your dimensions are 100% how you want them to read. Okay, so a couple more questions. Are there free scrapbooks that we can access for electrical symbols, etc.? The good thing with the electrical symbols is that if you do your electrical layout inside of PlusSpec, if you go into the component tool, you will note that we have electrical, and you can put in, for example, your switches, anything really, your fans, you know, what you want to capture. Now, that's actually going to have the symbol with it. So if you go into your electrical layout scene that PlusSpec generates for you, it will have the symbol attached. Or you can simply deactivate it so it's not visible and create your own. I do believe that there are various scrapbooks that are available to download. They're actually they're not difficult to make either. So once you play around with creating a scrapbook, we might even do just a tutorial just on that, or a webinar, I should say. Once you play around with it, you'll be surprised what you can do, and you can really come up with your own very easily. One question is, yeah, so previously, before SketchUp Pro 2017, the layout, if you're working and spending all your time setting up your line weights and your drawings and your hatching in sort of layout, then you needed to export to DWG so you could consult with your consultants, etc. The output was not great, and that's been one of the vast improvements of SketchUp Pro 2017, is that now your layout drawings, everything you do, your line work, your line styles, hatching, masks, everything will be, you can then import it, or export, I should say, into a DWG format, and it will be exactly the same as what you've done in layout. If, for example, you're wanting to bring in DWG details that you have, all you need to do is open a SketchUp file and insert the CAD, the DWG drawing. Once you've done that, you just need to save it. So you can either dump a whole bunch of details into one file, or you can separate each detail independently, and then you're saving that. That means that you can then import it into layout. And again, you can even go into a higher level of detail now, if they're standard details, by exploding them, and then assigning all the different line weights, line styles, everything. You can then group it, and then you can actually create a scrapbook with it in there. So you can continuously reuse those details. They're going to read exactly how you want them to read, and it's not actually a lot of work to get it to work that way. Let's have a look here. I believe there's one of these I like that. So what I'm going to do is just quickly show you here. All right, so if I open this SketchUp reference, all right, so we're going to have to call it quits after this, but let me just quickly show you. This is actually a 2D DWG. It's just been brought in. Obviously, they had the detail there. It was easy for them to just represent it like that. Didn't even worry about going into any extra work. Simply saved it as a SketchUp file, imported it into layout, and because it read well in the line weight, etc., they decided that they didn't even need to explode it and manipulate the line work. So very easy process. Okay, a couple more questions and I'm done. Can you transfer text from SketchUp into layout? Yes, so if you're going through, for example, in your PlusSpec model and you put in, we use a lot of 3D text, so using the SketchUp tool, SketchUp 3D text, you can, for example, put in your room name, you can set up the style, the font, the height, everything like that. Then you can place it, and obviously you can rotate it, do all the things that you need to do, scale it. And now when you go into layout, it will actually bring in those room names too. I'm not a huge fan of it. Depends. Have a play with it, see how it works and reads for you. That doesn't take any time whatsoever inside of layout to quickly go through and put in your title. And that way you can controlling it, you're manipulating it rather than having to worry about doing that in the model. There is something that's worth noting, and that is in your site plans. Yes, your symbols won't come through from your DWG format often. There's a problem with the way that SketchUp reads the DWG blocks sometimes. So maybe just try to explode your DWG, completely explode all your blocks, and then you should be able to bring in your symbols and even your text. But unfortunately, SketchUp doesn't read the text very well from DWG. So typically I will just go through and quickly write in the actual annotations that I require. I've even got an overlay here again, which I never showed you before, but that actually is a PDF, and the PDF is being scaled using PlusSpec, and it gives me a lot of other information that I might want to copy rather than trying just to guess. If I wanted to put all of these symbols in there, I could put them in there, and they're going to be 100% accurate. It's not a hell of a lot of time, so I don't think it's a time waste to do that. I just realized I never actually showed you how to explode. All you need to do is click explode. Once you've pressed explode, you can see that everything's been grouped. So you can just ungroup it, or you can just double click into the group. Now you can select, for example, a whole bunch of your lines. I'll do that a little bit differently. Grab them, and you can say that you want them to be, for example, dashed. You can set the line weight and everything else, however you want it to read, and that's obviously going to update. And then you can simply grab it and group it if you want to. All right, last question. Is there any way to establish 4-level annotations in layout? Yes. So if I go into the other drawing, you can see there that I've got this symbol here. The way that you can do that is that you can actually, if you want to capture your floor levels, go into your PlusSpec model, and very quickly, if you know what your finished floor level is, for example, so I don't have a slab in here, but imagine I did, I would be able to go into this group here, or component, and I would be able to type in, so I'd be able to say, if I want to capture the finished floor level, just go into this one of the blank fields and type it in. Right, once you've done that, you've now got the finished floor level 3.72. You can save it, you go back into your layout file, and if you use your annotation, you can grab a point, and then you can be able to click on this down part, and you'll be able to pick out your FFL, whatever it is, and therefore it's smart annotated. Now, then you can simply just hide this part or delete it if you don't need it, and then attach it to the symbol. So you'll be putting your symbol there and you know, having it work the way that you want it to work. You can then create a scrapbook of it as well, so you can just continuously reuse that at any time. Look, I hope this has been beneficial. We have gone over. I have answered as many questions as I could. If you are interested in us doing more and more webinars, please be proactive and register and keep showing up. More importantly, if there's something that you want us to talk about, a topic in depth, please let us know. Go to the forum. If you haven't joined up to the PlusSpec forum, please do so. It's a great way to interact with the community and ask us questions. And also, you can go and contact us directly and ask for the webinars or topics that you want to see. Yeah, and so if you have any questions or anything, we had a lot of people attend today, so I missed a lot of questions. If there's anything that's super urgent, please note that we'd have a lot of different training options too. And for example, we have the one-on-one online training. It's the best way to get good fast. It's completely dictated around you and your workflow. It is paid training, but it's well worth it. So if there's anything specific that you want to go through, don't hesitate to request some training, and it's on our website. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.